Hey folks, Steve here, and welcome to the Richmond Tigers official RMIT chosen course. I'll just say again, if you don't have an AFL side, the Richmond Tigers is the bus to be, and we are currently taking passengers. And funnily enough, Richmond Tigers have good support bases in a number of Asian demographics and communities across Melbourne City. So I'm just putting it out there. If you don't have an AFL side, the Richmond Tigers is the place to be. Okay, welcome to Asian Cinemas. And in this mini lecture, which I will try and keep short, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just going to talk through the course, what we're doing, what we expect, what we want, and the conversation that we will be having across the many weeks that this course continues. And hopefully conversations that will continue past the end date of this course. And this is a shot from a film called Tampopo. I'll talk about Tampopo in a different discussion. And you've got the character here asking if the soup comes first or the noodles come first, which I think is an interesting question. Is it the chicken or the egg or the soup or the noodles? Anyway, this course is called Asian Cinemas, and I think that's an interesting place to start. What do we actually mean by Asian cinemas? And we don't necessarily mean Asian cinema as in every film represents this country called Asia. Asia is made up of multiple smaller places and regions and maps, and it's broken down through the cinemas that it makes. For instance, South Korean cinema is very different to, say, Japanese cinema, yet it seems to have some sort of close response in the way that it's giving us a certain experience of the screen. And that's really what we're going to be talking about. The differences that each film has, but also the similarities that they have to each other. Now, Stephen Teo's readings are across this course. So, if Stephen Teo is listening, I'd like to acknowledge Stephen Teo for being a huge influence on this course and the many readings that we've chosen from Stephen's own biography of numerous and important work. Now, the reason why I like Stephen Teo, beyond Stephen Teo having an RMIT affiliation, adjunct professor Stephen Teo, is the way he really talks about the Asian cinema experience. And I'll throw a couple of Teo quotes at you. It is not the intention of this book. So he's written a book called The Asian Cinema Experience. It is not the intention of this book to provide a field guide to all the cinemas of the Asian continent, but rather to emphasize and examine the nature and the subject matter of Asian films to determine a broad theory of or outlook on Asian cinema. The proposition is that there is a holistic concept of Asian cinema, which one can feel and grasp through the experience of watching and analysing Asian films as a cumulative whole. Thus, the title of this book, The Asian Cinema Experience. And that's really where I'm wanting to go with this course. The whole idea that when you watch a film, an Asian film, you're getting an experience. And the question is, what is this experience that we're actually getting? What do we learn about Asia through these films? And do we learn anything that we can use in our own lives about Asia? And why are we drawn to Asian films? Another quote. The word experience implies a more phenomenological reception of Asian films, but from this experiential reception, we are prompted to cognitively explore the cultures, languages, and societies depicted in the films. Knowledge and learning is an inherent part of the phenomenological experience of watching Asian films. It leads us to a qualitative, if also more theoretical understanding, as opposed to a more quantitative survey-like and preliminary awareness of the various film industries of Asia and their productions. Oh my golly gosh, what's that quote all about, you may be asking, ladies and gentlemen? Well, what Stephen Teo is banging on about here is the theory is really important to understand exactly what Asian films are doing. And what he's kind of saying, amongst a number of things, is each Asian film doesn't need its own theory, that it kind of forms or falls into a broader idea and thinking about Asia. And again, coming back to this whole word experience, and what do we actually mean by experience? So what this course isn't about, the course therefore rejects the country by country survey approach, which Stephen Teo's book also does, which is probably why I wrote book instead of course. It also avoids the tendency to put Asian cinemas into regional clusters, for example, East Asia or South Asia, in the interest of cultural homology. Okay, so I've said that. So it's not this, this week we're doing Japan and then next week we're doing South Korea. It's not that sort of course, okay? We've got the films all jumbled up. So sometimes you'll see a Japanese film, sometimes you'll see a Chinese film, you may go back to a Japanese film. It's really about giving you, can I say, a smorgasbord of Asian treats and Asian delights in this course. And it's not, I would certainly never try and say, play you like an Ozu film and say, well, that's Japanese cinema. Because obviously he is one director directing one film in this broader history of this country. And, far from me to say that that represents something about that country or that country's cinema. Okay. Now, as Teo goes on, it aims to discover what is common about the divergent cinemas of Asia. Common, ladies and gentlemen, about them. So it's not just about difference and separation, right? In order to engender a unified outlook or theory of Asian cinema. So by the end, I'm really hoping that we're going to have a better and broader and deeper sense of what we actually mean by this very term, Asian cinemas. Approach to the course. This is a cinema studies course, not a film studies course. And what's the difference? Well, the difference is if it was a film studies course, we'd just be talking about films, the films. And in a cinema studies course, we're interested in the films as they play inside a cinema. And in this course, we'll be watching films in a cinema. So can you, please come to the screenings every week. Don't download the films and watch them on your, your MacBook Pro or your iPhone or other Apple affiliated products with screens. Come to the cinema, watch them as a group, and I'll be giving you sort of exercises to do at some of the screenings because I'm really interested in the cinema experience. And also, how do these films play at the cinema? Like, where do they play? Do they play at film festivals? Do they get mainstream releases? Do they get independent releases? Are there cinemas devoted to just playing Asian films? If you're a fan of Asian films and you want to watch films, at the cinema, where do you go? And we're in a very blessed time now where we can buy a lot of DVDs, we can buy our favourite films on DVDs, but there was a time when it was really actually hard to get Asian films, so you had to go to these cinemas, you had to hunt them down. And I'm really interested in the whole experience of watching films at the cinema and that culture that comes from watching films at the cinema. And of course, films are only one part of the industry. There's exhibition, there's distribution of the films. How are these films exhibited? As I said, whether they play at the cinema, but how they distributed. And I'm really interested in marketing and things like that go through discussing all of these films. Okay, what is the Asian cinema experience? What do we want or expect from Asian films? How do we culturally and socially position them? How do we discuss it beyond the films it produces? How do we discuss Asia beyond the films it produces, but within a cinema studies course? Where and how do we watch movies? So I'm very interested in you, like where do you watch movies? How do you go to watch these movies? Do you go, say, to film festivals? When you're at film festivals, do you watch Asian films? Do you not watch Asian films? Which, again, is an interesting question to discuss. Where do we place ourselves within it, as in the Asian cinema experience? And what should it do globally? Do Asian films have a global responsibility to be representing Asia in a particular way? And what are we learning about Asia through that? The way that, we kind of, we tend to sort of fetishize Asia and particular aspects of Asia, certainly Asian food. a lot of that is from the movies that we're watching. What is this course about? What is Asian cinemas? Where do we watch films? Approach the Asian cinemas as an international cinema space and shooting location. So Asian films shot inside Asia. So think location. Don't think of Asia in opposition to Hollywood. And I'm not trying to... I mean, the problem with talking about like Asian cinemas, right, is we say, well, the problem with Asian cinemas is there's this otherizing going on. Like Asia is the other to, say, the Western world, right? But the problem is a lot of scholars or courses, they go, well, yeah, that's a problem. But hey, Asia's completely different to Hollywood, and that's not actually that true. A lot of the films that you'll be watching actually have a narrative structure that you could say is a classical Hollywood narrative structure. A lot of the films you'll be watching actually have a very strong Asian... that's very strong Asian. Well, yeah, isn't that funny that these films have a very strong Asian influence? These films also have a very strong Hollywood and American influence, and a lot of the characters are obsessed by America, which again is something that's quite interesting. Thinking about the Asian cinema as an important import-export exhibition industry, and I think that's important, you know, the way that these films are actually being made to exhibit outside of Asia. They're not films, made just for the Asian market. They're actually made for an international market. Ask what is expected from a national cinema. And, you know, the thing about these films is each one is kind of part of a national cinema, but it's also part of an international cinema. And defining Asian cinemas beyond on-screen representation. So again, you know, this whole idea of Asian directors or, Asian actors actually moving outside of Asia and actually working on other films and things like that. You know, like a director like, say, John Woo or Wong Kar-wai, you know, moving actually to America. John Woo doing it a bit more successfully, in my opinion, than Wong Kar-wai. When discussing defining Asian cinemas, what do we mean? Do we mean films made in Asia? Okay, so Asian cinemas, what is it? Do we mean it's a film made in Asia? Well, that could be an American film made in Asia. Do we mean films representing Asia? Well, a lot of Hollywood films represent Asia, so are they Asian films? Right. Do we mean films consumed by Asians? Well, that's a tricky one. Do we mean Asian cinema as the place, the palaces and the houses? So what I mean is the Asian cinema exhibition industry, where these films play, how they play. You know, is there an equivalent of Hoyts in Asia? And, you know, discussing those kinds of things. And also in Australia, like where do Asian films actually play at the cinema? What cinemas play Asian films? Do we mean the Asian cinema industry when we're talking about Asian cinemas? And, you know, how do we actually discuss that? And do we mean the Asian experience? What is the Asian experience? And that is the important thing about this course, really talking through the whole idea of the Asian experience. Now, this is another quote by Teo, and it's a long one, but I think it's interesting. I'll just go through it now. A response to that need as well as to the recognition that Asian cinema is so extensive and multifaceted that specific areas and concerns demand more rigorous and detailed research. Here my attempt to provide an evaluative and analytical assessment of Asian cinema falls under three broad categories: styles, spaces and theory. And ladies and gentlemen, just to break that quote for one moment, that's how this course will be structured as well. Thank you again. Adjunct Professor Teo. Back to the quote. Such categories are my way of trying to contain the breadth and complexity of Asia as a whole, the diversity of the topics and themes addressed in Asian films, and the range of genres and the different styles and aesthetics represented. To develop a theory from this diversity and complexity is perhaps overambiguous, but it is nevertheless a necessary part of defining the term. So the point is, it's messy, right, to actually think of the Asian cinema experience and play a whole bunch of films and say, well, what's the experience? But it's kind of necessary to talk about the very idea of Asian cinema as a single entity, but a whole thing that's going on as well. And the final comment, and I'll leave it here, just what exactly is Asian cinema and what is its significance as a name that has come into popular usage in film and cultural studies. So by the end of the course, I'm hoping that we will have had really interesting, robust conversations every week about Asian cinema. Why is this film an Asian film? What makes this film Asia? What does this film say about Asia? How does this film represent Asia? How do we interpret and watch this film outside of Asia? They're the questions that we're really, really interested in. What do we mean and what do we think about when we see the very term Asian cinema, as Tio would say, or as we would say in this course, Asian cinemas? And that's the kind of thing that I'm really, really interested in banging on about, but also talking through across this course. So I'll leave it there, and I hope that gives you a sense of where we're going to be going with the course. And we'll be looking at a number of more classical films and a number of newer films. And all in all of the films are essentially about giving you some sort of experience. And a lot of them are giving you an experience of eating, because it seems that what Asian films like to do is show characters cooking and show characters eating. All right, I'll leave it there, and I look forward to discussing all things Asian cinema and all things Asian cinema experience with you across the next weeks and months as this course continues. All right, I'll leave it there, and bye for now.